You are now locked into the Red and Blue Rivalry Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk all things San Francisco 49ers and Dallas Cowboys.
My name is Arik Hernandez, and I'm repping the faithful.
And I am Phillip Enriquez, repping it for America's team. But on this episode, I want to talk about the 49ers, specifically the latest moves in this legal tampering period in 2020.
Yep.
But let's talk about some of the in-house stuff that's going on in San Francisco. So the first big news that really just popped out to me was the 49ers agreed to a 6-year deal with defensive lineman Arik Armstead. The deal's worth $102 million, $45 million in guarantees. How are you feeling about this deal?
Oh, man, I think I felt the same way most Niner fans feel, and it's the way we always feel when a deal comes out. It's called the circle of life for us. We see the deal. We get frustrated because we don't want to spend that much on this player. Then we see the details and how they break out, and we realize, damn, that's a really good deal for a really good player. And I think that changes. I mean, there's no difference here. I mean, it's a 6-year contract, and it's backloaded. I mean, literally, his base salary for the first 2 years is $2.5 million, and in 2021, $6.7. Now, it skyrockets to $14.1 in 2022, $15.9, $17.4, and $17 million in 2025. With the $17.5 signing bonus divided by 6, $2.9 million, so basically $3 million. This cap for him, for a guy he led our team in sacks, literally going to
10 sacks, right, on the season?
Yep. Literally going to only cost $5.4 million on the cap.
Yeah, that's nothing as far as cap hits go for this season.
Exactly. So, I mean, there was talk of him being franchise tag, which would have put him at $17 million, this year.
That's a $12 million saving, at least when you're looking at it for this 1 year.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what you look at. And I think he's a great player. I think the knock on Arik Armstead has always been health. When he's been healthy, even when they were bad, the one thing I can say is he had great effort, and he's a really good pass rusher. You got to see some of it this year because people were focused on DeForest Buckner, and we'll get to his later. And now you had Nick Bosa and you had D Ford. He really got to flourish in that role. I mean, the sack I'll always remember is the sack against Aaron Rodgers in the Week 12, I think, game, where he just looped around the guard and just destroyed him. And I'm glad he's there because even again, before that, when you looked at him he had some of his best work against Seattle. His ability to change direction at his size, he's like 6'6", 6'8", almost 280.
Yeah.
Just a monster of a man. And I just look at a guy who can get to the quarterback, be disruptive. He's not as good as Buckner as far as a run stopper, and Buckner's all around better player as far as 3-tech and being able to get to the quarterback. But Arik Armstead's nothing to sneeze at. I think he's a great player. I think pairing him with Bosa and Ford on the other side, I think that's a good group of guys you have for the next 3-4 years,
Right. So somebody that he won't be lining up next to on that defensive line is the D tackle DeForest Buckner, who was traded to the Colts for a first-round pick. It's the 13th overall pick in this upcoming 2020 draft. How are you feeling about just the trade? It's kind of hard because you don't want to. You felt like you wanted to bring. There's a sense of wanting to bring everybody back for one more shot, especially the way the season ended. Like you want another go with your roster as intact, which never happens. It's not reality. I'm sad to see DeForest Buckner go. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he started the season as probably the best player on that defense. I don't know how many plays you saw him make. I mean, he's great under pressure. He's a better pass rusher than Armstead. So to lose him, it does suck. And the defense, they have contingency plans, but nothing they can do can replace his abilities just as a player. That being said, when you get to this level that the Niners are, and they're not used to it. I mean, they were not good for a few years. So to finally be in Super Bowl contention and have a talented roster, things like this are going to happen. They're going to have to make tough decisions, and the only way to improve your team, is to continue to go through the draft and get young, good talent. And I mean, you get an offer of the 13th overall pick, and the talent that's in this draft at the position I think they're going to go for. I mean, I think it's too good to pass up, especially when you look at the long run. You're still going to have to pay George Kittle pretty soon. Guys are going to come up for contracts, so you want to be able to replenish your wealth. They had very little picks. Now they have 2 first-round picks. Yeah, and in particular, the contract that Buckner gets
from the Colts. It's paying him about $21 million a season. So, I mean, when you think about Kittle coming up, when you think about eventually they're going to have to pay Bosa on that same defensive line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that the numbers start adding up. You crunch the numbers, and it was just too much wealth, especially on that D-line to keep long term. So you do get the first-round pick out of this. I mean, are you excited now for the draft?
I'm pumped for the draft. And really quick before we end that one, the one thing I want to talk about is the guaranteed money that they don't have to pay DeForest Buckner this year. I think he was making $12 million that they freed up.
Oh, yeah.
So that they don't have to pay that. You know, he was a first-round pick.
It sounds like there's a move that still needs to be made in free agency for the Niners this season.
I think you'll see some more coming up. I think offensive line is going to be something they may kind of take a peek at. But, you know, going back to the draft again, the 13th overall pick, I mean, the Niners' glaring need, I think, is wide receiver. I mean, they kind of swung and missed a couple times. They hit with Debo, but Debo's a receiver in name only.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
You know, so you want somebody else that can complement him, can stretch the field, and he doesn't have to be a burner, but just a receiver that can get down the field and can force defenses to back off. And the fact that the Niners are going to be sitting there at the number 13 pick, and there are 3 wide receivers who I would love. Any one of these 3, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, or Henry Ruggs, one of those 3 is going to fall, probably 2. And to get a pick of one of those to, again, and as I've said at the end of the season, historic defenses do not last. I do not believe that even if Buckner and Bosa and everybody had come back, that they would have been as great as they were last year.
Yeah, collectively.
I just don't. You don't believe me? Go ask the Jacksonville Jaguars. Go ask the Chicago Bears. You know, Khalil Mack was getting, 20 sacks. How many did he get this year?
He only had I think he had less than a handful, right?
Yeah. Okay, you look at Jalen Ramsey was the cover god for a while. Just this big, imposing defensive back. He was getting burned by T.Y. Hill, and he got burned by Antonio Brown. These things happen to defenses because it's not it's
the
they
rules
can be steady
aren't set up for them to be consistent
year to year. But you know what can be? Offense.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Kyle Shanahan looked at. Is like, I'm gonna have to flip it. I'm gonna take a hit on my defense, but I get to flip this into a receiver that I can mold. He's had to pick receivers in the second round, and he's missed on some. He's gotten late round receivers. He's gotten free agent receivers. This is a chance to really pick one of these guys that can be his guy to pair with Garoppolo and, you know, get Garoppolo to that next level. Now he has a true number 1 target, you know, and then on top of having Kittle. So I'm excited. This allows us to pick somebody high. This allows us also to take that 31st pick and trade back and collect multiple picks since we don't have any. So it hurts on a personal level. Like, if you're a fan of DeForest Buckner, if you're a fan of these players, it's hard. It hurts. You know, you don't want to see that. But as a fan of the team and you look at the projection of the team, it's hard to say no to that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, it's hard to lose a player that is the caliber of a DeForest Buckner on that defensive line. That was the strength of your defense.
Yep.
That was dominant, I think, consistently throughout the season. I don't really think they ever truly dropped off.
No.
You know, slightly maybe towards the end of the season because D Ford was out. But when they're at full strength, they're at full strength.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they adjust. But on the back end of your defense, another important signing, a re-signing. You guys re-sign Ward on a 3-year deal?
Yes, 3-year deal. I think it pays him average of, I believe off the top of my head, $9.8 million a year. When we talked about this, I think at the end of the season and who was important, I had him 3rd behind Emmanuel Sanders and Arik Armstead. Now, knowing what I know now, like if I was told, okay, you have the 13th overall pick and you're going to get a receiver, then Emmanuel Sanders kind of takes a bit of a bump.
Right.
You know?
Because you're figuring you're going to get a receiver with that first-round pick.
At cheaper value than you would Sanders, you know, at a rookie contract. Now, Jimmie Ward, the dude has been hurt so much. It's like you're scarred because you expect him to be hurt. He's always
one of those. Is Sean Lee playing?
Yes. He played? I mean, at the beginning, they had a chance to get rid of him at the beginning of this season. And they brought him back on a 1-year deal, and he responded by breaking his collarbone and being out for preseason. And I was like, are you serious? Yeah. But when he's on there, fast, physical, I mean, he runs up, stops the run. You know, you look at what he can do as far as kind of tracking, being that free safety, that middle of the field, being able to lay wood on dudes, take those crossing routes to lay wood, to you know, follow the receiver. So I think signing him is a good thing. It also locks up your defense, and it literally brings back 10 of your 11 starters.
So I think that's important, you know, and you want to see if he can continue to grow. You have him on a 3-year deal, so I think that's great. What you're hoping to see is just to stay healthy. He was fine. He was a great free safety. You know, I think he's serviceable for what you're paying him. He probably, his deal, I think, ranked as like the 12th best. And I think according to some of the stats, he was like a top 8 or 9 free safety for what they asked him to do. So I think it's a good deal. I think you want consistency at the back end because at the end of the day, your corners are still question marks. You don't know what's on the other side of Richard Sherman. And Richard Sherman, you don't know when those wheels are going to fall off. So to have 2 safeties like Jaquiski Tartt and him to kind of anchor that back end, great, especially because you feel like the front 7 of that defense is awesome with Quan Alexander and the rest of them. It's just that back end, and keeping it consistent is a good way to go.
Yeah, I want to talk about another, this one's not front page news or anything, but how are you feeling about the Sean Coleman re-signing?
I'll never forget. I think he broke his arm that game we went to, no?
I think fractured ankle.
He fractured his ankle. I don't think he broke his arm. Yeah, he fractured his ankle. That's right. I think that's fine. You need a swing tackle because you saw what happened when they lost both. McGlinchey and Staley went down for 4 games.
Yeah.
And you saw the value. And I think that I'll never forget, there was a game in, I think, Shanahan Lynch's first year against Philly where they lost both their tackles and their backup tackle. They had a tight end pretty much playing tackle. That's terrifying. I think if you're a general manager and your job is to collect talent, that's got to be a nightmare situation. So I think Coleman was fine. I think he's serviceable. He's a swing tackle. You're not going to build the future. He's not going to take Joe Staley's job, but he's somebody that can be serviceable. And it allows guys like Brunskill to who was serviceable and admirable in his thing, to slide in to play guard, which I think he's suited at, and allows you more flexibility on your offensive line. You know, I think that
which really helps with that numbers game when you're talking about the roster.
Yeah,
guys that can play multiple positions on a line. I mean, that's so valuable.
You're not going to have 10 offensive linemen, you know, so you need some swings. Some tackles can play in and out, guards who can play center, and vice versa. So. And I also think that was something that did scare me a little bit, is the guard play of the Niners. Being able to you saw Chris Jones being able to bat balls down. I mean, that's some of Jimmie, that's some of the guard.
Arguably, that cost them the Super Bowl.
I feel that way too. So you want to be able to have that swing tackle. So I'm happy that he's back. It's something that we don't have to worry about. You know, it's kind of like we don't have to invest in a tackle this year to grow if we don't want to. If there's not one on the board, we don't have to reach for one. You know, we know Joe Staley's almost at the end of his road. You know, he's only got a few more years left, if that. So now I'm like, okay, do we have to get a tackle with the top pick? No, we can sit there and say if one falls, great. If one comes to 31 but
you have that flexibility,
you can push that back a year.
Yeah, so let's cap this thing off with the big $1 million question. Losing Buckner's a big thing. Like you said earlier, he was probably the best defender going into this season. I don't know about at the end of the season. I'd probably give the nod to Bosa.
Yeah.
But regardless, he's still number 2. He was a solid number 2.
Yeah.
Going into this offseason. So you're losing Buckner. However, when you look at it, it's basically Buckner versus Armstead, Ward, and a first. Are you a happy man at the end of the day as a Niner fan?
As a Niner fan, I am. Because
not as a regular man with this coronavirus?
No.
Okay. No. All right, but as a Niner fan.
As a Niner fan, I am, because I think you have to, and I've had this is the way I view it, is you love these players, but you root for the team. Like, I have no ill will. Like, he didn't leave under bad terms, and you can tell how much the team loved him and how much he loved the team. I guarantee you, like, you see the letter, the thing he posted on Instagram or Twitter saying thank you to the 49ers. They drafted me. We were 2-14. We were at the Super Bowl. You see love. It's not bitterness.
Yeah.
I can't say the same for DeAndre Hopkins and Bill O'Brien and the Texans.
Right.
It doesn't always end like that.
Right.
But they've done a good job of building a culture where they understand. So I'm not worried. That's kind of something you always worry about, is how that affects a team. You're losing a star player. But you kind of have that sense that their foundation is built and they're always going to look towards the future. And sometimes that means, if you want to stay competitive, that means making painful cuts. That means making business decisions. But they do it in a way that's not so demeaning. It doesn't leave the player feeling like they're a commodity. You see that in Buckner's reactions. So I'm excited about the draft. I'm excited about being able to get a receiver to pair with. I look at that offense because that's going to be the future. The San Francisco 49ers are going to go as far as Jimmy G and that passing game takes them. I know the defense is great, but defenses fall off. their schedule is going to be a little bit tougher. Teams are not going to, they're going to see them coming this time. So your passing game needs to take to the next level. Jimmy gets another year. You give him a Jerry Jeudy, a CeeDee Lamb, or a Henry Ruggs to pair with Kittle and freaking Debo. I mean, there's the future right there.
And I'm pretty sure DeForest Buckner's not too distraught about being off the 49ers with his $21 million he's making.
It reminds me of the, I think the Dave Chappelle where he's crying with the money, or he's holding the money.